Good afternoon. Well, I know that everybody can hear me, so I'm just going to take advantage of uh, 1 or 2 minutes so that we can give these 2 minutes for everyone to arrive. And well, first of all, I am sorry to say this, but I guess these are the most popular words these days. Could you please, as soon as you enter, turn off your microphone and in order for us to be able to communicate faster and better, um, turn off your cameras. You don't need nor the microphone nor the camera. If you want to communicate with us, please do use the chat. I am answering the chat questions and comments, so please make sure that you use the chat. Thank you very much. Okay, so that was the first aviso parroquial. Once again, thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Jair Ayala Zarate. I am the Vice President of ASOCOPI, and on behalf of the Board of Directors of ASOCOPI, we would like to express our gratitude for you to accept this kind invitation to be part of the webinars that we're going to start up conducting as of today. We're going to have ideally one every single week. We're going to start up today, Wednesday, next week, Thursday, and of course, we're going to let you know via our social media exactly who is going to present, what the topic is going to be, so that you can, of course, pre-register and once again take advantage of this time so that you can enjoy and participate, of course, of these webinars. For today, we have the pleasure to count with Margarita Araque. She's going to be our first webinar speaker, and she's going to be talking about like basically the ABC of how to use virtual education and what it is and like the ABC basically. So once again, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to permit myself to once thank you on behalf of the Board of Directors, our President Carlos Granados, our Treasurer Jose Aldemar Alvarez, our Secretary Katie Ramirez, our Office Manager Miriam, everybody knows her, and our spokesperson Jairo Castañeda, and me, Jair Ayala. So once again, thank you very much. And I guess we are going to start right away so that we can take advantage of the time. First of all, of course, thank you, Margarita, very much for accepting our invitation. So Margarita is she's a teacher of English as a foreign language at the university, and she has a master's in e-learning from Sevilla University. She is also a specialist in technology, mediated learning processes, and development of skills in education and corporate contexts. She has a lot of experience in this area. She has experience in regards to implementation or improvement of technological resources, as well as pedagogical approaches. She's dedicated to human development and good practices in the use of ICT. She works for Santo Tomás University here in Bogota. So with no further notice, with no further questions, with no further timing, we're going to start up right away. So thank you very much, Margarita. Once again, a reminder, please turn off your microphones, turn off your cameras, and please do use the chat to ask any question. I am going to be in charge of the chat, so I'm going to be taking notes of the questions you may have. At the end of Margarita's presentation, I am going to ask your questions to Margarita so that she's going to be able to answer them, all right? So thank you very much, Margarita. Now you are piloting.
Okay, so thank you, Jair, for your kind introduction. And Of course, welcome you all. And yes, my name is Margarita Araque. I will be your guide into this webinar. It's called Advice for New Online Teachers and How Technology is Actually Your Friend. Can everyone hear me well? I hope you do. Let's see if technology is our friend today. Good. So my intention with this presentation is, first of all, is not a lecture. This presentation comes from the voices that I've been hearing these days from many colleagues that I have out there in schools, in universities, in many places, who have never had the opportunity to be online teachers. Now, I have been a teacher for more than 10 years, and in the same period, I have been also an online teacher. I'm dedicated and inspired, and I do believe that it's possible to learn with technology. I guess there's someone with a microphone open, having a good time as well. Okay, so I would like to start by saying that as this is not a lecture, I just want to share some ideas that I have been gathering from my experience as a teacher, as a researcher, and actually I am currently an online student, and I have been in several times, I have been an online student, and I really appreciate and I recognize the possibilities that online learning allows us with technology. Now, one of the things that I would like to start sharing is the mechanics on this webinar. And this webinar is going to be split into two sections. In the first section, I'm going to tell you the ABC. I mean, it's like the alphabet. Once you are teachers, and especially English teachers, one of the very first things you do is to teach the alphabet. So now, as you are learning a new methodology and you're becoming new type of teachers, then you have to learn the same way, starting out of the basics. Now, I would like to start saying that I'm going to explain the ABC, the first advice. And secondly, I'm going to let you decide what you would like to emphasize in the second part. So I already selected some tips, strategies, and tools that you can use in your current practices that use technology. So now one of the things is that after I finish the first part, you can decide from the letters from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, which of them we'd like to emphasize first, and then I'm going to focus on them according to your needs, to what you really would like to hear. So what's your interest? Good. So the first part is talking about the types of strategies that you need to know are basically the first things that you need to change. Okay, so these things are adapt. So the first thing that you need to recognize is that in-person classroom or a regular classroom, it's actually it differs certainly from an online or a virtual room, but in general there are three things that you need to preserve, and at this point I invite you to reconsider and make sure you are able to transform and adapt into a virtual room. The first one is to concentrate on communication. You got to consider and recognize some sort of channels that allow you to communicate with your students efficiently. For example, try to consider tools that probably are considered or they are embedded into a learning management system. Those are words that some of you have already heard, probably if you had already had some sort of training, but this is very important. If you do not count or you don't have the possibility to have a learning management system or an integrated space in which you have a communication channel, please try to find one as soon as possible. Secondly, try to consider a space in which all the resources are contained or they are easily accessible for students, because the idea is try to standardize and to contain all into a single space. And in the same space, you can also come to assessment. So if you have the opportunity to consider a learning management system, or at least any sort of platform or web tool, or even a web page, or any type of space or an online space, to consider these three elements, that's the first thing that you need to have in mind. Secondly, adopt. And this is one of the most important things that you need to have into account at this point. Now, I'm going to use the example of what you need to do more and what you need to do less. So definitely you have to concentrate on including the idea or adopting the idea of an online lesson. An online lesson is not, definitely it is not a lecture. Please have in mind, I know, and I can't imagine the amount of stress and pressure that you might have felt the very first time you had to transform a regular class in which you are the voice and you are the eyes and you are the presence in the school. But now you have to take a step aside and try to use other resources and transform your regular class into a lesson that is not necessarily you the one who's speaking. And that is the very first change. Secondly, try to adopt new formats. And these formats require you to include, for example, different types of digital formats. And now, please, do not concentrate on trying to translate the very same resources you have in the traditional classroom into a digital format, because the translation does not mean effective learning, and that's the idea of having a digital format that does not assure you and does not allow you to be certain about the success on these type of resources. And I'm going to go further in the second part. The third one is less homework. In online learning, for example, we do not work in terms of having, for example, lots of worksheets and lots of like 10 homeworks every week. We do not work that way. We work in that, and we have a different way of working out with the time and with the resources. So try to think, instead of homework, try to think in terms of production, in terms of results, in terms of performance. So those are things that you need to start reconsider and adopting into your practices. And I am sure that in the near future, when the situation changes, I'm sure that it will also, your students will feel a lot better because they feel a lot more engaged in these type of activities. And finally, and more importantly, try to make the experience like a good experience. It's already been difficult for them to switch from an in-person to a distance or a technology mediated transition in schooling,
¿Qué
but
tu hija qué?
please try to
Ya,
think
yo
on
tenía el
how
audio.
to do better,
Gracias.
reducing the stress on structure activities, and try to think rather on more fun, because they really
Thank
want
you.
to have better experiences. Okay, so this is definitely my okay, this is my invitation for all of you guys. Okay, so the first one is please adapt and adopt new strategies. The secondly, and I have to say this one is one of my favorite, and it's to be present and be yourself. So that does not mean that if you are an online structure or you are taken into an online methodology, this means that you are completely separate from your students, and it's said that distance learning makes you feel distant, but I truly believe it does not mean to be like that. So definitely try to look, for example, to those habits that you have in class. For example, if you like to read a quote every day, or if you like to highlight the date or special occasions, or if you like to call the list every day, or whatever you feel that it's something you do in class, try to in that way try to replicate it. For example, send a message every day, a motivational message every day, or try to make them feel that you are there. But of course, you have to recognize that online learning, it's mostly about asynchronous learning, and I know it might be a hard transition, and maybe it's hard for us because I personally, I was for a very long time an in-person teacher. When I did the transition, it took me the first days were not easy because I wanted to be with my students all the time. But in online in training or learning, the consideration switches quite a lot. So please consider that the time that you are actually in an asynchronous space, like a video conference or any other type of experience that means that you are in the same time, please do not concentrate that time on lecturing. Please try to concentrate on that, on support, on solving questions, on providing new strategies for learning, and any other examples. I can give you more examples of that later, but this is something very important. And being present does not mean that you are at the very same time with them. For example, I do have my personal habits for them. For example, every second day I send messages, I share with them ideas and how to improve. I encourage my students, and they feel that I am with them, and they know that I am present, but I'm not at the same time. The third one, and I really like that one, is 3 keywords in online learning, and especially in current days. The first one is challenge. So try to think on how to challenge your students to many things. And of course, if you challenge them, you are challenging yourself. So please consider challenging as a way of creating different types of tasks, activities, and assessments. For example, I have my students, we have some sort of competitions, and we have different strategies that allow my students to encourage and to create and to challenge their skills and to show what they can do. And you might be impressed. I have personally identified new skills in my students that I have never imagined. Those are very difficult to come up with in an in-person or in a traditional classroom. Secondly, try to concentrate more on creativity. Try to concentrate at least some part of your tasks on making them do things. And that, in that way, I have to to say that it's not necessarily about using technology, because I have students, for example, I personally have some students who are in the farthest places, and so they do not have no, they don't have any electricity. So I ask them to, okay, I tell them, okay, if you don't have the tools, or you don't have internet, or you don't have even the access to a computer 100% of the time, you can use your hands. So they sometimes they do art crafts, they do drawings, they do cards, they do flashcards, they do it on their own. And there is a good saying that says, show me and I forget, and involve me and I've learned. So this is something I invite you to do change in your practices. And finally, collaborate. So how you can do that? Well, you can allow your students to collaborate. Sometimes when we are in an in-person classroom, sometimes we try to consider or think or feel that some partnerships are not necessarily like something we can take advantage of. But at this point in online learning, it's actually the best. So you can make that partnership be your ally. That means that, for example, you can make or allow students to collaborate even doing quizzes. And I can actually show you some experiences in which they collaborate and they can do quizzes, and it doesn't matter if they are all answering the same question, but at least once they have to ask each other and collaborate and try to check with each other's responses, in that way they also learn. So we don't have to limit their collaboration possibilities. So 3 ways to do that. Try to work, as I mentioned, try to work in terms of products, for example, e-portfolios. Try to use collaborative work, team projects work really well. Try to check on performance. So challenge your students. For example, I do had a system or many systems for example, rankings. They feel really motivated, and of course, motivate them, for example, with badges. The next one is differentiate. And I really like that because sometimes when we are in an in-person or a face-to-face class, it's very, very hard to approach and to really come to to come with the best strategy that covers all needs. But with technology and with online learning, I have come to cover a wider type of profiles with my students, and of course they according to their needs and possibilities. So for example, in some cases you can let students decide what better fits their needs and possibilities. And I have to explain something here. It does not mean that everyone does whatever they like. It's more about concentrating and having a clear objective for the tasks and activities. But some students, for example, are very skilled with technology. So if they want to evidence a skill with a video, that's perfect. But some others, they are rather good at paintings or doing something with their hands or even on paper. And we do need that. We need to make them students do things with their hands. I mean, they feel that they are connected with reality. It's not all about digital. That's a misconception about online learning. So now, for example, so we need to put into a balance on how they can, for example, they can make decisions on if whatever it's better for them, if it's rather digital or handmade, for example. But at the end, they both, regardless the format, they fit or they are addressing the same objectives or the same topics or the same types of formats or instructions based on what the instructor or teacher is aiming to. The next one is encourage. And I consider this one is very important because in traditional or in person, I never had to do this because I usually was in a class in which I had the control over my students' performance and even some behaviors. But in this case, we do not have control. And sometimes they can feel a little bit anxious or stressed or confused. And not all of them are they have the enough confidence to tell you. So sometimes it is you the one who have to try to approach their needs and try to come step be ahead and try to come to encourage. And there are two things that you need to consider. Of course, autonomy, it's good, but they also need some skills to become autonomous. And for that, for example, requires commitment. So one of the tips that I give you is try to make students make a commitment for themselves. For example, my students, before they start any subject, they do have to sign a commitment in which they commit, of course, for example, to communicate with the tutor, to complete the activities, to be aware of the time, and to follow the instructions and many other things. So try to sign and try to negotiate with your students some commitments. So that's the very first steps to autonomy. Some strategies, try to let them use a planner. So daily planning is absolutely necessary. That's something we do not have. We are not very like used to in compared to a traditional learning, but in online it's paramount. So please have in mind that. Also try to develop metacognition. So try to make students aware of their own learning. So it's not about just presenting tasks or taking exams or doing things, but hey, what I'm really learning, why I'm doing this, what's the aim. So, and finally, one of the most important things, and actually I will say that 50% of the time as an online instructor, it's spent on feedback. So definitely this is the best way to encourage and to let them know what to do better and how to improve. So our feedback, it's absolutely necessary. Sometimes it's actually not a matter of markings. It's about really providing support through the feedback. The next one is flexibility. And this is definitely one of the most difficult because sometimes in online learning, many things have to be very flexible with limits, but flexible. And there are three things to consider. Definitely consider time. In online learning, we do never talk about classes. We consider time spans, we consider some chronograms, we consider days, we are set into periods of time, not hours, for example. So try to think in terms of open times so everyone can cover that or develop the activities in that period, but not like you have 10 minutes to do this. So that's something we cannot control in online learning. Secondly, spaces. That's something that we currently talk about in this moment. We have a new, okay, let me see, 1 second. We have a new concept that is called ubiquitous learning. And that means that learning takes place anywhere. So that means that think on any space for learning. And that's something that is amazing that we did not have compared to our close, limited classroom. For example, I had one of my experience, I'll tell you something very short that for me was beautiful. I had once some students when there was these political candidates, and so they were doing a task, and so they had to go around the city taking pictures, interviewing people, and reading the newspapers, and based on that, they had to make a presentation on their opinions about the political situation in Colombia, and that was so amazing because each one of them were sharing from their neighborhoods, their communities, and they all were doing live action. So, and they became not only like better at English, but also they became better citizens. So that means that they did not require technology for that, but just life. And finally, evaluation. So for example, in this case, I invite you to consider three different types or methods to evaluate, which we use in online learning, and those are really, really useful. The first one is, of course, evaluation by the teacher, which we call hetero-evaluation, which means that it's not the student, but the teacher, the one to evaluate. Secondly, peer evaluation. So once they are able to share an opinion or try to contrast ideas, and if there are other people evaluating them, they try to do a better product, or they try to perform better because they will be like exposed to others. And thirdly, and I already mentioned that, please try to consider self-evaluation. And this self-evaluation is, or a way to make them understand why they are doing this and how the learning, the skills, and everything that has been set for them in an online space, they have an impact in their own lives. So these three types of evaluation are absolutely necessary in online learning. Now, in terms of evaluation, besides these three types, consider three things. Sometimes we focus on, for example, understanding skills or grammar or vocabulary, which that could be set into the category of knowledge. But also try to evaluate performance. Sometimes it's not about how accurate, but the willingness to do something. And that's something that we in online evaluation, we consider. The effort sometimes is actually a lot more, even if the result is not the best. Finally, the products. So as I already mentioned, evaluating in terms of products, it's a lot better than evaluating in terms of tests, for example. And I get this question very often. I get like, hey, I need to do a lot of tests. How do you do tests? And I say, I do a lot of tests, but the grading, the score is very low. And they do it just because they want to practice. I just use it as drilling, basically. But the real evaluation, for example, I do with my students in English, in my English courses. They, for example, they have to talk to me. They had to be able to write a letter to me, or they have to be able to evaluate a partner. So they are evidencing in terms of products, not in terms of quizzes. And that means evaluation is formative as well as summative. Okay, so finally, and I really like this one, is guide. So you as teachers, you have always been guides, but in online learning, we do consider this guidance as allowing the student be in the center, and we are just around them and try to be there for them. And I just have a small recommendation, and please do emulate the in-person interaction, but not the practices. Okay, because unfortunately I have seen some videos of teachers doing classes by Zoom like this, and then they want to control the students, closing the cameras and that sort of thing. So they try to emulate the type of practices they have in the traditional classroom. In the online environment, the interactions, they are pretty similar in some ways, but they are not the same in a huge different range of ways. So please try to consider that. So you are now, at least into these circumstances, while you are returning to your regular classroom, please set yourself as a guide as you are trying to help them and guide them, providing good feedback, good resources, and at least a good experience for them. So please, these are the observations, the advice that I had for you. I hope they are useful up to this point. And now I'm going to move into the second part. So now, the mechanics of this second part is very simple. As you can see, there is these are the advice all put together, and then you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Each one with a particular action or advice. So now I would like you to take a minute to decide which one you would like me to give you strategies and tips first. So all you have to do is to write in the chat the letter that you better would like to start, okay? And then I'm going to emphasize in that first, and then we continue. In that way, I will I will try to identify what are your current needs on the current situation, because I could go all over them like in the same street order, but in this way, I want to emphasize in what you really need now. Okay, so take your time. I'll give you a couple minutes for you to decide. Please, in the chat, write the letter, only one that we're going to start working. Don't worry, we're going to cover them all, but not in the strict order, okay? So take your time, and I will be here. I will be checking. So please, Jair, help me out, trying to identify which letter is going to be the trend, just as an overview, and then we are going to work on that first.
All right,
Okay.
no problem. We can see here that most of us have chosen A as to
Okay.
start up with.
Okay.
And then the
Perfect.
second one would be F, and the
Okay.
third would be E.
Okay. So Jair, you're
And
going to give
also, yeah,
me
yeah,
you
don't
give
forget
me
that we
the
also
line.
have some other questions. All right, no problem. So we're gonna start up with A, all right?
Yes.
So,
Okay.
and then we move
Yes.
on with F.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So remember, this is the second part of the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing A. Okay, so the first thing to do to recognize here is that I am a trainer. I am a coach for teachers, and one of the things that I usually do is to tell my teachers who are learning how to become better online trainers, or at least have the skills to become that. I tell them that it requires time. Okay, it requires a lot more time, I have to say. At least at the beginning, it's a lot more demanding than a traditional class. Okay, but the results can be amazing as well. Now, one of the things that I want to share is the A, right? So I'm going to stop this. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing some of the skills, some of the strategies that I have decided to share with you today. And these ones are, as I told you, those are just general. Of course, there are many more out there. You can find even more by yourself, but yes. But don't worry, I'm just going to give you like an overview of them with some strategies, some examples. And of course, when I do my training, I go in depth in each one of them, and we recognize many more things. But as we don't have enough time, we are going to go just as a general overview. So A, adapt and adopt. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the first thing is to concentrate on a particular space, which is in terms of online learning, is called learning management system, which, remember, it recognizes three basic elements: communication, resources, and evaluation. So one of the most basic ones that you can use is Edmodo. It's a very good one. It's for free. But as I'm going to tell you, many of them they have free mode but limited mode. So my recommendation is try to negotiate, or try to consider, or come to an agreement with your institution, so all students and all teachers come in the same place, because we don't want students having 20 different tools and 20 different ways of doing things. So this is really overwhelming. Believe me, this is not ideal. So another one you can use is Nearpot. It's a really good one. It's quite recent. It's mostly for schools, so it's adaptive. But of course, as I mentioned, it's limited at some point. So for small groups, it's perfect. But if you have large amounts of students, so you better consider a more standardized LMS. Now, another thing that I consider, and this is just an example of how to come on, or how to approach the concept of lesson. Okay, so I'm going to close this. So lesson. So an online lesson, and this one is TED Ed. I really liked it. It covers a wide range of topics, of subjects, and those are based on a video. They also have some comprehensive questions, and they have a space that I really like, that it's related to critical thinking. So you can do many things. The video is not very long. For example, as you can see, this is like 1 minute, 2 minutes, Yes, this is not very long, but the questions and the type of interactions and products, and there are so many things that you can use from there, and it's all created for you. So there is no need to spend time on creation, but just thinking on how to make them use, learn, practice, and evaluate with that. Now, the next one is, for example, of course, G Suite. There are plenty of tools that you can take from G Suite. Of course, my recommendation, ask your institution to cover an institutional set of tools. Of course, mail, you have documents, you have calendar, very, very important. You have forms, Jamboard, you have Meet, which is for video conference, pretty good. Groups, Classroom, which is now a tendency. So this is here, it's very good as well. But my recommendation again is to try to use institutional accounts and institutional services for this. Otherwise, you will be limited at some point. The next one is this one, if you like to create. I personally use this very, very often. It's pretty good to create like dynamic, interactive sort of activities that includes videos, evaluations, practices, presentation, games, etc. This one is totally free, and you can download or you can embed anywhere you like. So this one is pretty good as well. The next one is Excel. It's similar to the previous one. It's a little bit more basic, but very simple and very good. It's called Excel Learning. EducaPlay, it's similar to H5P. Similar, you can create activities or you can find, but you have to recognize the copyright. This is all they are require you to do. This one is for free as well, and probably many of you have checked on this. This is from Colombia Aprende. And there are some resources, digital resources, and some documents. They are supposed to be aligned with the programs and the syllabus and the courses on the National Planning for Bilingualism. I have not used them because unfortunately I work for a university, but I've heard they are very good. The next one, this is one of the examples that I mentioned for portfolios. This one they can register, and this is basically like a blog. So you can use this tool or any other tool that's worth for blogging. It's perfectly, valid. And as I mentioned, for games and activities, those ones for British Council are really good, are set up for specific levels. For example, in this case, you are seeing the Learn English Kits. So you have games, activities, you have even for printing, and so they can make at home. And they have a parent section as well that I consider it's pretty good. So those are just some ideas for you to be using. And don't stress, there is no need for you to create content. I mean, some exceptional topics or exceptional things, they are required for you to be creating out from scratch. But it's not necessary to be for you to be creating all of it. For example, I do have some resources that I have created on my own, but in fact, we have an ebook and we have a set of resources that have been set up for us. And my real role is to design strategies. It's all about being the creator, being the leading head, not just a designer. Okay, so do not concentrate, do not spend too much time designing, creating, because there are a lot of resources out there that are already there for you. This one, for example, is for teens. So for example, for secondary students, for high school, they are very good. You can download, you can use videos. There are many things. They are already concentrated on the specific levels and skills. So there is no need for you to create. But those you can use, for example, like in terms of skills. And based on that, you can create extra tasks or extra activities. So this is just the basics, but it is you the one who put all those resources together to create a learning strategy. We have also this one for games. This is for small kids as well. It's pretty cool. Those are mainly for the basics, for games, and these are very good strategies, very good ideas for for using in your synchronous sessions. For example, in your video conference. So, for example, with my students, we do some online games. So we are playing online, and this is the way I evaluate them. There are some others that these are a little bit more advanced if you are more willing to challenge yourself. We have this one. This is a tendency called gamification, and that's how to transform regular learning into a more adapted into more like a game, like an adventure, challenging experience. But as I mentioned, it requires a lot more time and training. I usually use this, but I had to take my teachers a lot, give my teachers more time and practice for them to feel comfortable using this type of resources. As well as this one. This is called Minecraft for education. This one is pretty cool. And of course, this is more close to what they see at home, like video games. And it works really, really cool. It's really cool. It works fine. But as I mentioned already, it requires a lot more time and you have to have clear objectives on how and why to use it. So it's not all about fun and entertainment. So this is it. This is about adapt and adopt. So now, Jair, which is the second one? Can you please remind me?
It was A, F, and E. And also, I want to remind you that you have 15 more minutes, and we
Okay.
have like about 10 questions that I'm going to try to put them all
Okay.
together, like in
Perfect.
2 or 3 questions. All right.
Okay. Okay. We're going to go very, very quickly.
All right.
Actually the first one was the longest. These ones are shorter. So for flexibility, so please take on a calendar so they are aware on how much time they're allotted and how close they are to deadlines. And again, remember, it's not about strict hours and strict timing, but standardized periods of time. For example, days, or every 2 days, or every day, or something like that, or periods like weeks. That also works very fine. In terms of flexibilized evaluation, use rubrics. Rubrics are our best friend in online learning because you can evaluate different criteria, and at the same time, you can use them for provide feedback at the same time. You can create quizzes. These are very good, but try to make them more challenging. It's not only about multiple choice and not only about correct or incorrect, but make them understand and provide good feedback on how they can improve. This one is free. This one is for vocabulary. Many teachers have asked quite a lot about that. So we have these are some good strategies for be using, but it's not necessarily something you need to be doing all the time. And this one, Socrative, is also very good. And as a tool, it's similar to the previous ones, but again, all of them, they have some limitations in terms of paid or plans on some registers and everything, okay? So those are good at some points, but do not concentrate too much on using too many tools at the same time. Good. The next one was Jair. Excuse me, the next one
No problem.
after
That was
F.
A, F, E.
F, E, encourage. Okay, I like this one a lot. So I ask my students usually to have their own calendar and their own space, what is called a personal learning space for them. And that is, sorry, this is a space for them to organize their tasks, because sometimes when in an in-person or traditional classroom, they just get there and then they see the teacher until the next session. But in here, they are in the subject all the time. So they need to organize their time, their tasks, and the load they have or the time they have to consider for each one. So some assignments and everything needs to be registered, and you can also control them, you and the parents. So this one is pretty good. Another one is PIN-UP, which is for those who are a little bit more independent, so they can control their works and the progress, like using to-do lists, which I personally use, are very good, and they can also be creative at the same time. Good. The next one, which was
After that was C.
C, challenge. Okay. So for small students, we have Class Dojo. I really like that one, especially for the little ones. That is really I really liked it. So they use avatars and they can get points. So the encouragement goes around ranking, points, scores, badges, and it's really, really, really appealing for students. Padlet, which is really, really nice. It's like a wall. I really like it. My students love it. I, for example, have an example here of one of my recent projects from my students. They did some videos, some presentations, and they can vote, they can make comments, they can upload any sort of format, and they can share. So this works out very well. They can create, for example, the using pictogram chart, they can create infographics, presentation, flyers, or they can create mind maps or concept maps or shared projects with Trello. So those are just some ideas, as I mentioned, to consider collaboration and inspiring and triggering creativity. So that's really, really worth it. And with one product, you can evaluate lots of things. So it's a lot easier for me as well to evaluate. And the next one is
G.
G. I love this one. And in this one, I'm not sharing, actually, I'm not sharing a tool, I'm sharing tips. And please consider these ones, and these tips are for both, for teachers and students. So first one, time management. I can't emphasize enough on how important is time management, because as I mentioned, 80% of the classes or the courses are asynchronous. Secondly, find a good space for you and your students. Help each other using collaborative work. For example, you create groups in which you can communicate in a more efficient way. And take breaks as well. It's not good to stay every day all the time. And of course, open up channels of communication for your students to reach you. But of course, limits, because you are not answering like on a Sunday morning or a Saturday night. No, you have to set up limits on when and how you have to communicate. And the last one is, and I really like that, this is my final reflection on this, is humanize. How to humanize. Please consider this. I am actually, if you like, I can share this with you right away in the chat, because in fact, this is the best thing. So you have to become a facilitator and a course designer. So above all, those are the two things. Being in presence, show, do not be a robot. Serve when students need support, and know your students. Recognize especially the current circumstances they are facing are not easy, and then you have to be flexible and be human in that way. And of course, all other aspects that I have already mentioned in terms of course design. Good. What is the next one?
The last one is B.
B. Okay, I'm going to share in the chat. I'm not sure if it's fitting.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the questions that you already have, and I guess you always have, is that one. If you could share all the names of the platforms
Yes.
and websites that you have showed us, so that would be great.
Okay. Sorry, what was the letter we are missing?
B.
B. Oh, yes. Perfect. Okay, I love this one, and I also get a lot this one is how to reach my students when we are not in a conference, in an online class. Which, remember, we do not use the word class in online learning. We, for example, use Flipgrid. I'm going to share very quickly, so it's better to show you an example and how to do an asynchronous way to reach your students. For example, this is one of my courses, and these are my students. They are all speaking. I talk to them, they talk to me, they interact, and we have lovely conversations, and they love it because they can record themselves. They use stickers, they have memes, they have lots of things, and in that way they do communicate. We look our faces, so it simulates like we are in the same space, but it does not mean that I am all the time there connected with them. So it's a very good tool. I love it. It's Flipgrid. And VoiceThread is pretty similar, and I actually did a research recently about the impact on having this human-like interaction. For example, the one with Flipgrid and VoiceThread, and we analyzed based on the results that, for example, feedback, when I do feedback in a way that they can see me and hear the teacher speaking, it's a lot more, it has a greater impact in their learning, especially, for example, in speaking. Okay, and the results are amazing, and we, in terms of, not only in terms of learning skills, but also in terms of confidence, because they are not afraid of on mistakes, because they can record themselves as many times as they like until they feel it's like something they feel good, and the result is great, because we don't have that sort of practice in person. So that's another one that I have. I invite you also as well, if you have the opportunity, to check on my other webinars. I did this one, Profesor Presente a la Distancia. That's another one I'm going to share with you on later on. Good. We
All
have
right.
any
We have
other?
5 more minutes. No, that's it. You already covered your alphabet.
Oh, nice. Good.
Alrighty. So you already answered some of the questions that the audience posed. One of the questions was related to rubrics. The other one was related to the tools for assessment, hetero, peer, and self-evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess when there was a question that has to do with maybe I think it was Mauricio. I'm sorry. You asked about the what have the universities done in regards to computer skills development for pre-service students.
Okay.
There are already some research ongoing. There's already
Mm-hmm.
some publications. So
Yes.
maybe you could browse. I saw in profile, Liliana Cuesta already published something related to that topic. So that is already covered. The
Mm-hmm.
very first question was, what would be the difference, or what skills you mean when you want to refer to develop autonomous learning, and
Okay.
um, how to discover those skills, how to develop those skills with this modality. That would be like two questions in one.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So, what skills to develop autonomous learning, and how to
Mm-hmm.
discover those skills?
Perfect. Okay. So the simple answer is this. Um, Autonomous learning is being able to regulate yourself. Okay. So sometimes we think that we are not autonomous, but we are. It's just that we are not aware, and we do not know how to do it properly. So how to organize our time, for example. So one of the first things that as I, for example, was checking on this one, is to set up on a control of our own behaviors and actions. For example, self-regulation, self-discipline, and self-monitoring. So those are some aspects that we can consider in terms of autonomy, and of course, time management, one of the top ones. So yes, for example, remember I told you at the beginning of our courses, we make our students sign a commitment. And part of this commitment requires them, for example, to considerate enough time and space for their own learning, to consider to find at least some skills or tools or strategies to self-regulate, develop self-discipline and self-monitoring. Okay, and of course that is connected to what I mentioned already about self-evaluation. Sometimes actually they are very aware at the end of the course, like, you know, I probably did not dedicate enough time, or I was not so organized. My teacher did the best, but I was the one who did not respond as I should. So probably it's a combination of different ideas and strategies that you might have into account when once you are talking about autonomy, because it's a really big term and currently we need it, but it's also something that we develop gradually because many people are not used to that, so we have to help them.
Right. Thank you very much, Margarita. I'm going to try to put together like 3 questions in one.
Okay.
Well, first, it is very important for us if you could share like the stages of one of these conferences, as you call them, and as we should call them from now on, not classes.
Okay. Oh
And
yeah,
like the
sure.
stages and possible examples on what would be a warming up activity, what would be an engaging activity, what would
Mm-hmm.
be closing activities, and so forth. And the second part of this question would be in regards to the timing that we should devote for each of those stages.
Okay, perfect. Good. So I really like the way about thinking on a video conference as a different, as not like a class, because we are not doing class. In fact, we use the term tutoring. And tutoring means, or it has an implicit idea that the students already have the tools, the resources, and they already know what they are asked to be doing or what's the results that we expect. So in that way, we have 3 stages. So the first one is the previous stage. So for example, like 1 or 2 days before the video conference, which we call tutoring. So I send them, for example, I tell them, hey guys, remember you need to read this, you need to go over the lesson, to check on the ebook, you have to develop this and this and that. Also, I tell them, please bring your questions on these topics. Also, show me and be prepared to be answering to some type of games or practices. Also, I invite them to show me their progress on what they are doing. For example, if I ask them to work on I don't know, on a video about their biography. So I tell them, okay, bring whatever you have and let's put it, and then all together we can compare and then we can share and collaboratively we make corrections. I really love doing that on class, but I never teach. It's not a lecture. Also, if there is a question, like a specific question, I provide them with extra activities, extra tools, and sometimes explanations, but that is something I did in a very specific moment, but I do not concentrate on that. I bring games, I bring activities. For example, I set up a poll like I did at the beginning of this section. I tell them, okay, think on what is the best place on your house to be studying. So, and I set a poll using the software that we have, and I make a question, they choose, and then they have to go to their bedroom, to the garage, and they have to take a picture, then they have to share the picture, and then describe the picture. So you see, I am connecting the reality with the digital tools. And of course, that is during and after, that's the third stage, I share the recording, which is absolutely necessary because they need to go over it. Sometimes I ask it to watch the recording for an exam or an extra activity. And of course, I do a conclusion or a summary with some recommendations and some ideas that I found based on that session. Okay, so as I mentioned, they are the center, they are doing all the work, I'm just guiding, and I am recommending, and I'm leading, and I'm trying to identify what they need, and then I tackle those needs immediately.
All right. Thank you very much, Margarita. Well, I have this is like a kind of theoretical question. What would be the difference between distance, remote, and virtual learning?
Okay, well, distance it's more closely to blended. So, for example, I am actually I have two positions currently. I have online instructor, but I am also distance instructor or distance teacher because I do have some courses in which I have to go in person to Santo Tomás University, in which I on Saturdays, in some Saturdays, I have to meet my students and then we cover the contents and I do an in-person tutoring. So in that way, we use distance or blended. Online is fully 100% virtual. And there is a new concept. Thank you for asking. I really like that recently, because of the pandemic and the circumstances, they have been calling that remote, not online. Because in some ways, we are trying to emulate or trying to adapt the strategies that we have for the regular classrooms, but mediated by technology, but not structured and planned and designed from the very beginning as being either distance or online. It's rather kind of an experiment, which have been recently like named as remote or technology mediated learning, but not necessarily online or distance, because we were not preparing our classes from the beginning of the year as distance or blended or online. It's actually we are just responding to some sort of circumstances.
All right, thank you very much. Well, there are many other questions like Mariana, Santa Janet, Paula Lizarazo, various other people already asked questions, but those questions I am almost sure that they are going to be answered in the upcoming events, in the upcoming webinars. The next one, for your information, is going to be with Dr. Raul Mora, and he is going to continue talking about this same topic. The name of his webinar is called Transitioning. I just want to read it out here. Is moving from, here I have it. The name of his presentation is My Home Desk is My New Classroom. Transitioning from schools to remote and virtual teaching. So the idea is for you to, of course, please do accompany us next Thursday, of course, not tomorrow, next week. We're going to have our host is going to be Dr. Raul Mora, and he's going to continue dealing with this topic. There were questions related to how to teach virtually or online young learners and very young learners, how to engage students in this type of in this modality. And of course, I'm sure that we all are taking notes so that we can ask the upcoming presenters to answer these type of questions. Um, Thank you, Margarita, very much for your presentation. I think it was absolutely enlightening. And there were many people here. I mean, like we have 35 people interacting, chatting all the time, asking super interesting questions. Second invitation, please visit our website, asocopi.org, so that you can find their upcoming events. Answering one of the questions here was our annual conference. Yes, our annual conference for the very first time is going to be online. It's going to be virtual. So please do check our website. There already we sent the call for proposals. Submit your proposals. You can be also attending. You can be presenting. There are more possibilities this year with this modality than we have ever had. Hopefully you learn. I did personally. Next week, we're going to work a little bit more in depth on this topic. We are planning, Margarita doesn't know that yet, but we are planning on having her for a second, for a second webinar. She knows.
Okay.
So that we can actually start working on your questions as part of the upcoming webinars. I would like to do a very I don't know, a simple exercise to see if we could all, before we say goodbye, if we could all turn on our cameras to see each other, to see if this actually can makes us feel a little bit closer. As Margarita said, this doesn't mean that we need to be distant. We can be in the distance, but we should not be in a distance. So if we could all please turn on our cameras to see who we are with today, to look at each other's faces. There we are. Oh, Carlo is there. The boss is there. So
Of course.
yes, so thank you very much for coming. Thank you for participating. Please pass on the word to your friends, pass on the word to your colleagues, to the associates, to the members. Next week, we're going to have the second webinar. It's going to be with Dr. Raul Mora. It's Thursday at 5 in the afternoon, same modality. We're going to share with you the link so that you can connect. And basically, that's it. If you have like a very specific questions, maybe have them ready before we start the webinar. We can ask Raul for those questions. And once again, the invitation is for you to please visit our website. There is a lot of information that it is very interesting and useful for you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. And most of all, thank you, Margarita, for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you all for inviting me.
Not a problem. Once again, on behalf of ASOCOPI Board of Directors, thank you very much. There is Carlo. Jose Aldemar was all the time here supporting us. He was in charge of putting all together like these logistics for this webinar. Of course, the invitation was sent by Miriam. We were all together working to conduct this first webinar. Thank you for the support. And of course, we hope to see you next week again. Have a great afternoon. Please stay safe. Thank you very much. And I will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
So,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
bye.
Bye-bye.